Boy, these 3-hour days are killing me. What time is it anyway? Help! Jane! Stop this crazy thing! Stop! Help!
Oh, my God, George!
Did you not hear me out there?
Dad, are you all
Go to
right?
your room, Elroy.
But what happened?
Go to your room!
Back then, the Jetsons came to me very gently. It was just those evenings when the whole family turned on the TV and laughed at George Jetson complaining as if he were on the brink of collapse, even though he hadn't finished a full workday. Laughed at Rosie, grumbling non-stop while still running the entire household. Laughed at Astro, who could barely pronounce a word, yet kept throwing himself at his owner as if terrified of being left behind. Everything felt carefree and naive, a pastel future that drifted by without leaving a scratch. But as time passed, and we returned to Orbit City with adult eyes, that picture began to crack. Beneath the clouds that never part lies a dead Earth. In a city with no police and no government, the company boss becomes the only law. The family's meals are reduced to a handful of pills, while the laughter that plays on cue is in truth the sound of bored, sometimes even booing audiences. Details once dismissed as jokes suddenly lock together, forming a world that feels unsettlingly cold. Below are 20 truths that the Jetsons kept hidden, and if you watch until the end, there is one thing that will make you never look at this show the same way again. 20. The original series had only 24 episodes. There's a very specific weekend morning memory turning on the TV before breakfast, and the Jetsons was already there. Orbit City felt so familiar it seemed endless. But the truth is brutally simple. The original series had exactly 24 episodes before ABC pulled the plug in 1963. The problem was that those 24 episodes refused to disappear. They were immediately fed into Saturday morning rerun slots and clung there for more than 2 decades, rotating between ABC, CBS and NBC. An entire Generation X grew up with the Jetsons without ever realizing they were watching the same tiny handful of episodes over and over again. Even more ironic, the Jetsons made more money after it was cancelled. Reruns were profitable toys sold well, ratings stayed strong. So in 1985, the show was revived with 41 new episodes, followed by another 10 in 1987. The number of new episodes alone ended up exceeding the entire original run. What made the revival special was that it felt like a continuation, not a remake. The original voice cast returned George O'Hanlon, Penny Singleton, Mel Blanc by then, all in their 70s and 80s. Hearing those aging voices echo through a gleaming future created a beautiful paradox, the future narrated by the past. So if you're Gen X, you remember the Jetsons in soft pastel colours. If you're a millennial, your memories glow with blinding neon and Orbity bouncing everywhere. Either way, Orbit City was a place you once lived, only the lighting changed. 19. George works only 3 hours a week. There's a classic joke everyone remembers. George Jetson goes to work, sits down, presses a button, then comes home exhausted and complaining. As kids, we laughed at this weak, whiny future dad. As adults, the laughter turns confused. He works only 3 hours a day and still complains about being exploited. This isn't a plot hole, it's deliberate satire. In the early 1960s, America genuinely believed automation would free humans from labour. Machines would do everything. People would simply supervise. George embodies the anxiety buried inside that dream, a man who does nothing but press a button, yet lives in constant fear of being fired, shouted at, mentally crushed. In one episode, George even has a breakdown because he's forced to work 9 hours a week. At the time, it was a joke. Today, when audiences are used to 40, 60-hour work weeks, that joke feels like a slap in the face. Not because George is lazy, but because the paradise he lives in is impossibly distant from our reality. The Jetsons doesn't show off an easy future. It exposes a paradox no matter how advanced technology becomes. The feeling of exploitation doesn't disappear. George isn't afraid of hard work. He's afraid of meaninglessness, afraid that one wrong button press could collapse his entire life. And sadly, that fear feels very familiar. 18. Rosie is intentionally outdated. You probably remember Rosie as a symbol of future technology, a robot maid with sharp remarks cleaning the house while throwing verbal jabs at her employers. But if you look closely, there's something deeply illogical. Rosie looks old. Not old in a stylistic sense, but genuinely obsolete. This wasn't an accident. Rosie is an outdated robot model borderline embarrassing by the standards of 2062. The Jetsons bought her because she was cheap. Other households have sleek, silent, multifunctional robots. The Jetsons have a rusty, noisy helper designed after machinery from the 1950s. Child viewers saw Rosie as cutting-edge technology, but within the show's internal logic, she's the clearest sign that the Jetsons are not wealthy. They're poor by future standards, comfortable enough, fully functional, but always stuck with used tech. A family pretending to be middle class in a society where technology defines social class. Ironically, it's that very obsolescence that makes Rosie the most human character in the house. She gets cranky, tired, nostalgic. While the world around her grows smoother and more emotionally vacant, Rosie carries the creaks and rattles of the past. She doesn't represent the future, she represents what was left behind. And that's exactly why she's unforgettable. 17. The ground never appears because it's dead. Have you ever noticed that in the Jetsons, we never see the ground? Only clouds. Thick clouds. Endless clouds. Clouds that hide everything below. As kids, we assumed it was just animation convenience. Why draw more than you need? But the original production materials reveal a chilling truth. Never show the ground because Earth's surface is uninhabitable. Humanity didn't move into the sky. By choice, it was forced to flee. Beneath Orbit City lies a planet destroyed by ecological disaster war radiation. The clouds aren't there for romance. They're a curtain hiding a mass grave. Suddenly, many details take on new meaning. George's greatest fear isn't just losing his job, it's being sent back down to the surface. A punishment that sounds bureaucratic but is actually a death sentence. The heaven above isn't a reward, it's the last refuge. The Jetsons live above the lucky survivors. They don't inhabit a bright future. They're surviving on the edge of extinction, smiling so they don't have to remember it. 16. Astro was almost written out. It's hard to imagine the Jetson household without Astro, the big, clumsy space dog whose loyalty borders on stupidity. Astro is an emotional anchor amid flying cars and robots. He's what keeps that world warm. But the irony is this: Astro nearly didn't make the cut. In his debut episode, The Coming of Astro, the Jetsons test two pets. Astro, a real dog, and Electrono, a perfect robot dog. George clearly favours Electrono. His logic is thoroughly modern. Why deal with shedding fur, bad smells and emotions when you can own a dog made of circuitry? The family even stages a competition to decide which one to keep. Electrono wins every test, obedient, precise, flawless, until a burglar breaks in. The robot is programmed to attack anyone wearing a mask. Panicking, the thief grabs George and pulls a mask over his face. Electrono immediately turns on the homeowner. Astro, meanwhile, panics and runs wildly, and in that chaos, accidentally slams straight into the burglar, knocking him unconscious. Not perfect, not logical, but instinctive. George softens. Electrono is donated to the police. Astro stays. The Jetsons choose an endearing flaw over emotionless perfection. A rare, deeply human decision in a world that's otherwise too smooth. 15. The truth about Jane and George's ages. We're used to seeing Jane Jetson drawn as a youthful, slim, fashionable mother with a gentle voice, the ideal housewife of American television. But the official numbers tell a very different story. Jane is 33. George is 40. Jane was designed to look 18 in order to inspire housewives watching TV. But here's the problem. Judy is 16. That means Jane gave birth at 17. No one on the production team caught the math during development. By the time it was noticed, it was too late. Character ages had already been printed on toys, colouring books, and promotional materials. The network refused to change them, and so the official Jetsons canon accidentally turned Jane into a teenage mother in a futuristic family sitcom. A family from the space age turns out to be built on very old problems: early marriage, teenage pregnancy, rigid gender expectations. The Jetsons promises a future of flying cars and robots, but at its domestic core, everything is still stuck in the 20th century. 14. The show predicted every modern nightmare. There's a moment every adult recognises you. Open your laptop for a video meeting while wearing pyjama bottoms. Glance at notifications on your wrist. Tell a talking box to turn on the lights and a disturbing thought pops up. Wait, didn't? The Jetsons already do this. And yes, they did. Video calls George and Jane were FaceTiming back when Zoom was still science fiction. Wrist screens. Elroy had a primitive Apple Watch before we learned to count steps just to pressure ourselves. Wall-mounted screens, flat TVs, tablets, news feeds. It's all there, minus the pop-up ads. The robot maid may not fold your laundry yet, but the little vacuum disc rolling around the Jetson home is unmistakably a Roomba ancestor. Smart homes, auto lights, self-opening doors, a push-a-button and it's done lifestyle. The Jetsons didn't portray this as luxury, but as an inescapable routine. And while we don't have airborne traffic jams yet, delivery drones and personal flying devices from the Jetsons now look eerily familiar in the age of DJI. They didn't predict a dream. They predicted overload technology, making everything faster and easier, while humans quietly become worse. 13. Missing episodes erased for racism. When people talk about lost Jetsons episodes, they usually assume technical issues or poor archiving. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. 3 completed episodes were deliberately destroyed because their content was overtly racist. Surviving script materials show alien species built using the same discriminatory stereotypes common in the 1960s, only with skin colour replaced by alien skin tones. Speech patterns, behaviour, physical traits, all reflected very real human prejudices of the era. Even when set in the year 2062, the Jetsons carried the fears and biases of its present. The studio understood that if these episodes aired, the so-called bright future would be exposed for what it really was. So they chose the simplest solution: erase them completely. The Jetsons talks about the future, but it wasn't brave enough to confront the darkness humanity carried with it into that future. 12. The laughter is actually screaming. In our memories, the laughter in the Jetsons made every scene feel safe. Laughter meant this is just a joke, nothing serious, but the truth is far more unsettling. The original laugh track wasn't recorded specifically for the Jetsons. ABC reused audience reactions from other sitcoms, including shows that failed and were cancelled. Buried in those tapes wasn't just laughter, there were boos, groans, even moments where you can clearly hear someone shout, "This is awful." Those hostile reactions were mixed in as background sound for a futuristic family sitcom. It wasn't until the 1995 remaster, when audio tracks were separated and cleaned, that the truth emerged. The Jetsons had been booed for years without anyone realising it. That revelation changes the rewatch experience completely. The laughter sounds harsher, offbeat, as if the audience is laughing at the wrong moments. The Jetsons is haunted by the ghosts of failed shows, jeers echoing from the past, following it into the future. 11. Orbit City has no government. Many of us remember feeling strangely safe while watching the Jetsons. Everything runs smoothly, cleanly, without chaos. No protests, no police sirens, no news broadcasts. As children, we assumed the future was simply so civilized that government was no longer necessary. But watching again as adults, it becomes clear it's not that government isn't needed, it doesn't exist. Throughout the entire series, there is no sign of government police courts or public services of any kind. Crimes happen, crises erupt, accidents loom, and the only real power belongs to corporations. More specifically, the boss. Spacely isn't just George's employer. He controls the family's job, their home, their future. Being fired doesn't just mean losing a paycheck, it means losing the right to live above the clouds. Orbit City operates like a feudal corporate fiefdom, where economic power has completely replaced the power of the state. The Jetsons pretends to tell a story about personal freedom, but Orbit City is really a prison in the sky. The future eliminates government and replaces it with your boss. Flying cars just make that prison look prettier. 10. Judy's boyfriend died in Vietnam. You probably remember that Judy Jetson had plenty of boyfriends. They came and went, changing as quickly as hairstyles. But one of them disappeared without explanation. Ricky Rocket, one of Judy's early romances, appeared in a few episodes and then vanished from Orbit City entirely. The reason wasn't in the script, it was in real life. Ricky's voice actor, Donald Brown, was drafted into the Vietnam War and was killed after recording only 3 episodes. The studio couldn't explain the character's disappearance without mentioning war an absolute taboo for a family sitcom airing during children's hours. Their solution was chillingly simple: erase the character, introduce new boyfriends, and continue as if nothing had happened. Brown's family didn't even know his voice was still airing on television while he had already died on the battlefield. And so, for a brief time, Judy Jetson, a teenage girl of the future, was dating a ghost, a voice from the past, echoing in the year 2062, carrying with it a death from 1960. The Jetsons never talked about war, but war still crept in quietly and mercilessly. Their future, in the end, could not escape the cost of the present. 9. The pills are amphetamines. One of the cute details everyone remembers from the Jetsons is the pill-based meals. No cooking, no clean-up, just swallow a pill and breakfast is done. As kids, we saw this as the ultimate convenience of the future. But for audiences in 1962, the joke wasn't innocent at all. Those pills were directly modelled on the diet and energy drugs popular at the time, primarily amphetamines. George's morning energy pill was coded language for speed. Jane's happy pill was based on Valium mixed with amphetamines, the familiar cocktail of American housewives in the 1960s. It was a very dark joke the future no longer eats. Humans survive on chemicals, work on drugs, feel joy on drugs, endure life on drugs. Modern audiences often miss this layer because the references feel dated, but at the time, everyone understood. The Jetsons don't sit down for dinner, they swallow dinner. The Happy Future family is in reality a family maintained by pharmaceuticals. 8. Flying cars never land. There's one image from the Jetsons that always stuck with me. Flying cars gliding past windows, pulling up in front of homes, everything flowing as smoothly as magic. But if you look closely, you'll notice something strangely funny. You never actually see a flying car land. Not once. The reason isn't futuristic philosophy, it's the drawing board. The animation team simply didn't know how to draw a convincing landing. 3-dimensional perspective, vertical axis movement, shadows, depth. All of it was far too complex for early 1960s television animation. The studio reportedly spent around $10,000 on a single test attempt, and the result was so bad it was unusable. After that, the director issued a direct order: avoid parking scenes entirely. From then on, every landing happens off-screen behind buildings or is skipped with a quick cut. You still hear the landing sound effects, but the visuals never follow. The irony is that this technical limitation ended up making the Jetsons feel more accurate. Their flying cars are exactly like modern tech promises, always visible in advertisements, never actually touching down in real life. 7. The collapse theory is real. For years, the idea that the Jetsons takes place in a post-apocalyptic world was dismissed as a dark fan theory. But the truth is, that version is the official one. Internal documents from 1962 State it clearly, war and ecological catastrophe destroyed Earth's surface, forcing humanity to build cities in the sky in order to survive. These details are never spelled out, but they're scattered throughout the series. Background art hides distant mushroom clouds. George's computer displays surface radiation readings. The opening traffic jam looks more like a mass evacuation than a morning commute. Buildings stretch endlessly upward, because below means death. The Flintstones, Jetsons crossover. Once confirmed this, outright the Flintstones live below in the ruined world. The Jetsons live above among what remains. But the network heavily edited it for being too bleak. Viewers were never meant to know that the bright future was really a nuclear refugee camp. The Jetsons doesn't tell a story about progress. It tells a story about survival after catastrophe wrapped in cheerfulness to make it easier to swallow. 6. Spacely sprockets made suicide chambers. There's a question. The Jetsons never answers directly, what does Spacely sprockets actually produce? George just pushes a button. The product is unclear, the factory is vague, but cut production materials reveal a grim truth. Spacely sprockets manufactured components for euthanasia machines. Spacely's fortune comes from the industry of death devices that help people end their lives in an overcrowded post-apocalyptic world. The rival company Cogswell Cogs made competing versions. Their business war was really a race to control death more efficiently. This explains Spacely's cold cruelty, the insane pressure placed on George and the persistent gloom lurking beneath a family sitcom. George isn't just pushing a meaningless button, he's pushing a button in a human termination pipeline. No episode ever says this outright, but the traces are there in the settings, in the vague dialogue, in how everything revolves around being eliminated. The Jetsons pretends to be a technological dream, but its economy is built on despair. 5. The theme song contains Morse code. The opening theme of The Jetsons is one of the happiest tunes in animation history. But beneath those cheerful electronic beeps lies a detail that sends chills down the spine. The beeping contains Morse code repeating the phrase, "Help us." This was only discovered during the 1995 remaster when the audio layers were separated. The Morse pattern appears 247 times across the 24 episodes, far too consistent to be random. The sound designer claimed it was accidental. Hanna-Barbera denied any intent. Yet no one has been able to explain why the signal is so precise. There's a sadder theory it was a cry for help from the people making the show. Overworked animators, impossible deadlines, relentless weekly television pressure, a message hidden where no one would look the background sound. So the happiest song of childhood turns out to be whispering a plea, not from the characters, but from the people behind the screen. 4. Elroy's voice destroyed the actor's throat. I still vividly remember Elroy Jetson, brilliant hyperactive, with a voice so high-pitched it could exhaust adults just by listening. But behind that voice of the future lies a painful story, literally. Dawes Butler. Elroy's voice actor had to maintain an unnaturally high register, constantly straining his vocal cords to keep the character sounding young and super intelligent. The result was severe vocal damage. Butler required throat surgery and spent 6 months unable to speak normally. Both his family and doctors urged him to quit the role. The warning was blunt: if he continued, his voice acting career could end permanently. But Butler needed the money. He returned to the recording booth and kept squeezing his throat to produce Elroy's voice, a child of the future slowly destroying the voice of the present. By the 1985 revival, Butler could no longer play the role. Elroy returned with a new voice, brighter, smoother, easier on the ears. But the price had already been paid long before. 3. The collapsing building episode was pulled. There's a feeling many of us remember from watching The Jetsons as kids. Orbit City always felt solid upright, floating serenely above the clouds as if nothing could ever touch it. That's why the episode where the Skypad apartments nearly collapse was shocking in a way completely unsuited to family viewing hours. In this episode, George uncovers a horrifying truth: The building he lives in was illegally constructed using substandard materials and cost-cutting shortcuts. As the structure begins to tilt, the entire neighborhood panics and evacuates, and the most terrifying part is this. The building is leaning toward the toxic ground below. No safety nets, just thinning clouds and death waiting underneath. Spacely is exposed as criminally negligent a boss who doesn't just exploit workers, but endangers an entire community to maximize profit. In 1962, this hit far too close to home. America had just endured a wave of building collapses and apartment fires caused by fraudulent construction. The network panicked over legal liability, and the episode aired only once before being pulled permanently. 2. The Jetsons is really Blondie in space. The biggest and most carefully hidden truth is this. The Jetsons wasn't built from science fiction. It was built from the American family sitcom. More specifically, from a 1930s comic strip called Blondie. The formula is almost copied verbatim: the well-meaning but bumbling husband, the smart wife who holds the household together, the irritable boss who shouts non-stop. This isn't coincidence. Hanna-Barbera deliberately took America's most familiar family template and coated it in futuristic paint. The most direct connection was casting Penny Singleton, the Blondie herself, as Jane Jetson. Her voice had defined the American housewife for decades. What truly keeps the Jetsons alive isn't the future, it's nostalgia for a familiar American family sent far away into space so it could pass as a dream. 1. Judy Jetson almost became a real-life teen pop star. Judy Jetson wasn't just Orbit City's fashion-savvy, boy-crazy teenager. In the eyes of Hanna-Barbera, she was also a music project that never quite took off. Years before, the Archies scored a #1 hit with Sugar Sugar, the studio had already imagined turning an animated character into a real-world idol. From the start, Judy was designed with pop star energy, her hair fashion sense, musical crushes, and rock and roll fangirl vibe were perfectly in tune with the era. And the studio had the infrastructure to make it real record labels, partnerships with Golden Records marketing plans. Judy didn't sing in the show just for fun. She was being groomed to step into the real world, but the original series ended too soon. When The Jetsons was cancelled, the idol dream died with it. Judy became one of pop culture's great almost a star who was never allowed to exist. In the end, when the screen goes dark and Orbit City slowly dissolves into memory, what lingers isn't flying cars or robot maids. It's an uneasy feeling. The Jetsons was never really about the future. It was about the fears of the present, wrapped in pastel colours, canned laughter and a cheerful tune, so children wouldn't ask too many difficult questions. If you grew up with the Jetsons, leave a comment about the detail that stayed with you the most. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you don't miss our next videos.